They didn't cry when I died. They just asked who got what. That's the first thing I remember, even in death. Not a tear. Not a whispered, thank you. Just, did she leave the house to us? Let me ask you something. Have you ever watched your own love be spent like spare change? Given with both hands, month after month, only to realize they were never reaching for your heart. Just your wallet. My name is Margaret Holloway. I was born in 1959, raised in a small town where you knew your neighbors and they knew your business. I married my high school sweetheart, lost him to cancer when I was 55, and never stopped waking up early to make 2 cups of coffee, one for me, one for a ghost. I never remarried. I never traveled far. I stayed put, stayed faithful, stayed useful. Because that's what mothers do. We stay. My son Jason was the light I clung to in the dark years after Thomas passed. He was always a quiet boy, soft-eyed, a little awkward, but with a heart as big as Montana. He married a woman named Trisha. She had charm, the kind that draws attention in a room. The kind that walks a little faster when you're struggling to keep up. I didn't quite take to her. But I told myself, every family has to blend its rough edges. Maybe love smooths it over in time. Jason lost his job during the pandemic. Like many others, he was laid off, left sitting at the kitchen table staring at bills and watching the numbers in his bank app bleed out red. They had a baby girl by then, Ava, my first and only grandchild. Her smile reminded me of Jason when he was little. That made it easy to give. Too easy. At first, it was small. Mom, we're behind on the electric bill. Mom, Ava needs formula. Mom, we had to put groceries on a credit card. So I did what mothers do. I sent money. $300. Then $500. Then $700. Every single month. I told myself I was helping them find their feet again, not realizing I was simply cushioning their comfort while I bled mine dry. I downsized my insurance. Skipped replacing my broken heater. Cashed in a small CD I'd been saving for a vacation I'd never take. I even sold the pearl necklace Thomas gave me on our 25th anniversary, because they really needed it this month. I never told anyone. I just kept showing up. Quietly. Faithfully. Until one Sunday evening, while scrolling through Facebook, yes, even old ladies have profiles, I saw Trisha's story. A mirror selfie in a velvet green dressing room, wearing a pair of shoes that looked expensive enough to pay for a week of rent. The caption read, "Shout out to my Mile for being so understanding, smiling face with hearts, hashtag Gucci girl, hashtag mothers know best." My hands went cold. I remember staring at that photo for a full minute, the sound in the room hollowed out like I'd opened a vacuum. Ava's laugh wasn't in the background. Jason's voice didn't echo down the hallway. It was just me, and the knowledge that I was the joke in their inside joke. They weren't surviving. They were shopping. And I was footing the bill. I didn't say anything. Not that day. Not the next. What would I say? Trisha, I saw your story and it broke my heart? No. That's not how these things work in real life. When you've spent years building a version of yourself that's helpful, non-intrusive, always there, you don't get to turn around and suddenly scream. No one would hear it anyway. So I did what women like me do. I watched. Silently. And when you really pay attention, people show you who they are. It was like someone had scrubbed the dust from my glasses. I began to see things that were always there, but now sharp and screaming. A new blender in the background of a FaceTime call. A fresh gel manicure when Trisha waved at Ava. A spa voucher falling out of her purse when she visited. And then one night, a small thing, barely a moment, but it tore something inside me. Ava was over for the afternoon. We were baking cookies, chocolate chip, her favorite. The kitchen smelled like melted butter and sugar. She stood on a little stool, stirring the dough with both hands, her tongue poking out the corner of her mouth. I said, "When you grow up, maybe you'll make cookies like this with your kids." She giggled and said, "Mommy says you're only good at cookies, 'cause you're too old to do anything else." I froze. Ava didn't even know she'd delivered a dagger. Children don't lie. They just repeat. I smiled and handed her the spoon. But inside, something crumbled. When Jason came to pick her up that evening, I asked him, gently, "Do you think you guys still need the money I'm sending?" He looked confused. Almost irritated. Well, yeah, Mom. You know, things aren't easy. Trisha's had a hard year. And I've been applying. I nodded. No accusations. No confrontation. But that night, I sat in bed, staring at the ceiling fan as it spun lazily above me, slicing the air into slow, heavy pieces. And I asked myself, what is the cost of kindness when it's mistaken for obligation? I gave them what I thought was support. They saw it as supply. I gave out of love. They received it with expectation. Where does generosity end and self-erasure begin? That line blurred somewhere between my bank statements and their brunch receipts. I wasn't angry, not yet. Anger comes from betrayal. And betrayal comes from the belief that someone should have known better. But maybe they didn't. Maybe I taught them to expect this. Maybe I made it too easy to take. There's a kind of quiet ache that lives in your chest when you realize you've been easy to ignore. Like a piece of furniture that's always there. Supportive, solid, but never truly seen. I stopped baking for a few weeks. Stopped calling. Stopped checking in. And no one noticed. The silence wasn't filled. No, how are you, Mom? No, we miss you. Just a monthly text. Got the transfer. Thanks. I remember standing by the window one evening, watching the leaves outside turn amber. The house was quiet. No music, no visitors. Just the soft hum of a life that had grown too still. And I thought, if I disappeared tomorrow, would they come looking for me, or for the checkbook? That question didn't leave me. It sat beside me during dinner, followed me into the grocery store, hung in the air even as the cashier said, "Have a nice day." I smiled at her, but inside something was shifting. I wasn't done being a mother, but I was starting to wonder, what would it look like if I mothered myself for once? Not with guilt, not with fear, not with the quiet, conditioned surrender that came with every dollar sent without question, just with clarity. The kind that begins not with a scream, but with a pause, a stillness before the storm, and the first real silence in years, one that wasn't empty, but full of decision. I didn't slam the door. I didn't cut anyone off. I just stopped refilling the silence they left behind. That's how it begins, you know. Not with fireworks. With pauses. The next month, I didn't send the transfer. No message. No explanation. Just absence. A quiet gap in a pattern they never thought would break. 3 days later, Trisha texted, "Hey, did the bank mess up or something? Money's not in." I stared at that message for a full 5 minutes. No hi, how are you? No, is everything okay? Just confusion. Inconvenience. Like a subscription had expired without notice. I typed and deleted a dozen replies. Ended up sending just 2 words. Not anymore. No follow-up came that day. Or the day after. But on the 3rd day, Jason called. His voice was low, hesitant. "Mom, is something wrong? Did we do something?" I wanted to scream, "You've been doing it for years." But I didn't. Instead, I said, "No, sweetheart. I'm just reassessing some things." That word, reassessing, I don't think he even heard it. He sighed and mumbled, "Okay. Well, just let me know if anything changes." And just like that, the call ended. No protest. No visit. No concern. Just distance. And the sound of my own breath in a house that used to echo with something warmer. I started walking more. Not to lose weight. Not to fill time. Just to breathe again without feeling like I owed anyone something. On one of those walks, I passed by the church where I used to volunteer. The doors were open. I hadn't stepped inside since Thomas's funeral. But something pulled me in that day. Inside, the stained glass threw colors across the pews like confetti made of light. I sat in the back alone. No prayers. No words. Just silence. And that's when I realized I wasn't grieving my son. I was grieving the version of myself I had spent decades perfecting. The giver. The reliable. The background presence everyone forgot to thank. And without that role, who was I? It's a strange thing to stand at the edge of your own life and realize you built a home for everyone but yourself. That night, I made tea, sat by the window, and opened the little wooden box where I kept my most private things. Old letters, Thomas's cufflinks, Ava's first drawing. And in that same box, folded beneath years of sentiment, was my property deed. The house I lived in, fully paid. No mortgage. A life earned in coupons, carpooling, and working late shifts at the hospital until my knees gave out. I held that paper in my hand and felt something I hadn't felt in years. Power. Not loud. Not arrogant. Quiet power. The kind that doesn't need to be seen to be real. And that's when I asked myself, what would they do if I didn't leave them a single dollar? Not out of spite. Not to hurt. But simply to draw a line. One that said, you may be my blood, but you do not own my sacrifice. That question haunted me, in the best way. It followed me through my routines, not like a burden, but like a key I'd just discovered after years of thinking the door was locked. I didn't know the answer yet, but for the first time, I was curious. And curiosity is dangerous when it grows inside someone who's been silent too long. A week passed. Then two. No one knocked on my door. No one called to ask if I was okay. But Trisha did post a meme on Facebook that said, "Funny how people get stingy when they think you don't need them anymore." I didn't react. Didn't comment. I just stared at the screen and whispered to myself, I never thought you needed me. I thought you loved me. And maybe that was the real betrayal. Not the money. Not the silence. But the slow realization that I was never seen as a person, only a position. The ATM. The babysitter. The backup plan. I remember sitting in the living room a few nights later, holding a framed photo of Jason when he was 5. Missing teeth. Crooked bowl cut. Grinning with his arms around my neck like I was the whole world. What happened between that little boy and the man who now sent one-word texts and forgot my birthday? Was it the world that hardened him? Or was it me, loving him so much I never asked him to grow? I gave too much. And in giving everything, I taught them that I had nothing else inside me worth protecting. That's the most dangerous part of motherhood no one talks about, how easy it is to lose your name in someone else's needs. But that night, something shifted. I took out a notebook. Just a small leather-bound journal I'd bought years ago and never used. And on the first page, I wrote, "This is mine." No one would see it. No one would care. But it was a declaration. A quiet reclaiming of the space I had abandoned in my own life. From then on, I started writing little truths each morning. Not essays. Not poems. Just small sentences like, I don't have to apologize for saying no. Silence is not the same as peace. Love is not measured by how much you give up. Each line was like breathing into a part of myself I didn't know was still alive. And then came the day I opened the drawer with the manila envelope. The one marked, estate, private. Inside, all my deeds. My will. My plans. It felt like looking into the future from the edge of a cliff. I asked myself, what legacy do I really want to leave? If I died tomorrow, would they mourn me? Or would they just rush to the mailbox looking for keys, codes, account numbers? That question didn't bring sadness anymore. It brought clarity. I didn't need revenge. I didn't need drama. I just needed to draw a line no one else could see, but I could feel. The next morning I called her. Joan. My college roommate. We hadn't spoken in years, not since her husband passed. But I knew if there was one person who remembered me before I became a mother, it was her. Hey Jo, I said. You still have that little legal office of yours? She paused. Yeah, why? I smiled. I need to make a change. She didn't ask why. She just said, come by at noon. And just like that, the first quiet step toward a new chapter began. Not in anger, not in rebellion, but in honor. For myself. Not because I stopped loving them, but because I finally started loving me. And sometimes, the bravest thing you can do is to stop giving to those who only remember you when they need something. I arrived 5 minutes early. Joanne's office was in the same old brick building it had been for decades. Faded paint, a brass doorknob that had known too many winters, and a ticking wall clock that still sounded like college nights spent cramming for finals. Funny how time moves forward, but some places, they stay still. Like they're waiting for you to catch up to the truth you've ignored. Joanne looked exactly as I remembered her. Silver hair swept into a bun, glasses too big for her face, and a voice that always carried both comfort and command. She didn't ask me to sit. She just looked me in the eye and said, "What are we doing today, Margie?" And I said, very softly, "I want to move everything out of my name." She didn't blink, didn't gasp, didn't ask why. She just nodded, pulled out a yellow notepad, and clicked her pen. "Where do you want it to go?" I slid a folder across the desk. Inside, a notarized power of attorney, a property transfer agreement, and a letter I had written the night before. Not to Jason. Not to Trisha. To Ava. Because if there was one person left in this world who might still look at me and see more than a bank account, it was her. I took a breath. I want the house, the land, and the investments transferred to a trust. Managed by you. Ava's name will be added at 18. Until then, no one touches it. Joanne raised an eyebrow, then smiled. Not what I expected. But it's all perfect. That was the first time I'd heard the word perfect in a sentence about me in years. She got to work. Fast, focused, no nonsense. As she typed, I looked around the office. There was a photo of her husband on the desk, framed in walnut. They'd been together 43 years before he passed. That kind of love leaves echoes. You can feel it even when the person's gone. And I realized I wanted to leave echoes too. But not of bitterness. Of boundaries. Of quiet strength that says, I was here. And I chose myself in the end. Joanne printed out the draft, laid it in front of me. I read every word. Slowly. My name. Ava's name. A clause that stated, in bold, no member of the immediate family shall have access to assets without express written consent from the trustee. There it was. The line in the sand. Not drawn in anger, but in ink. When I signed it, my hand didn't tremble. Because this wasn't revenge. It was relief. The room was still, except for the scratch of the pen on paper and the breath I didn't realize I'd been holding for years. When it was done, Joanne leaned back. You okay? I looked at her, smiled the kind of smile that only comes after a long, hard winter has finally broken. I think I'm more than okay. We stood. Hugged. And before I left, she slipped me a small envelope. What's this? Your original will, she said. In case you want to update the message. I nodded. Because yes, there was one last message I needed to write. Not to wound, but to whisper. A single line. A single truth. A final gift of love to myself. The house felt different that evening. Same walls. Same creaky floorboards. Same wind tapping against the kitchen window like it always did near dusk. But something had shifted. It wasn't louder. It wasn't brighter. Just quieter, in the kind of way that feels earned. I brewed chamomile tea. No sugar. No honey. Just heat. Simplicity. And sat at the kitchen table, alone but not lonely. I unfolded the envelope Joanne had handed me. My old will. The words on it felt like a ghost from another lifetime. Carefully divided assets. Jason's name repeated over and over. A few scribbled notes on sentimental items. My wedding ring, the old piano in the den, the quilt from my mother. I read it through slowly, then placed it aside. I took a clean sheet of paper. And for a long time, I just stared at it. Do you know how hard it is to write when the only person you're writing for is yourself? Not to explain. Not to justify. Not to make someone else feel something. Just to be heard, even if only by silence. I picked up the pen. It felt heavy. Not physically, but in its meaning. And I wrote one single sentence. I leave behind all my love, but not a single dollar to those who treated me like a transaction. I didn't need to write more. Because everything else they already had. The years. The dinners. The diapers. The quiet rescues no one remembered. And this one line, was the only thing I'd ever written that was entirely mine. I signed it. Folded it. Slipped it into the new envelope marked final. Then tucked it away in the top drawer of my bedside table. Next to the Bible Thomas gave me when we got married. Next to the photo of Ava holding a tulip upside down, thinking it was an ice cream cone. Next to the proof that I had finally, quietly, learned the difference between love and loyalty bought through silence. I didn't cry that night. Not because I wasn't sad, but because this kind of sadness doesn't leak out in tears. It settles into your bones like a truth that no longer needs to be debated. There's a kind of peace that comes from choosing yourself. And it doesn't roar. It doesn't dance. It doesn't demand to be seen. It just sits beside you in the dark and says, "You finally remembered who you were before they forgot." The next morning, I woke early. Made myself pancakes. The thick, buttery kind Jason used to love. I ate them alone. In silence. No distractions. No guilt. And when I cleared my plate, I placed the extra 2 pancakes into a container and wrote Ava's name on it. Some love doesn't need to be rewarded. Some love just needs to be protected from erosion. That afternoon, I dropped off the container at Jason's house. Trisha opened the door, robe, phone in hand, eyebrows arched like I was late to an appointment she hadn't scheduled. I didn't explain. Didn't ask how they were. Didn't stay. Just said, "This is for Ava." That's all. And turned. Walked away. Not with bitterness. Not with resentment. But with something better. Distance. The kind that doesn't disconnect, but redefines. The kind of distance that says, "I still love you, but I finally love me too." And in that space, I had room to breathe again. Room to make a plan. Room to live my days not in reaction, but in choice. Because when the time came, and it would, I needed to be sure that what I left behind wasn't wealth or war, but a message. A final one. One line. Written in ink that couldn't be erased by guilt or greed. 2 years passed. No grand drama. No warnings. Just a quiet winter morning in late February, when the neighbor noticed the papers had piled up on Margaret's porch. The coroner said it was peaceful. A mild stroke in her sleep. No pain. No struggle. Jason was notified the next afternoon. He didn't cry. He told the neighbor thank you, made a few calls, and arranged a cremation. No service. Just ashes in a standard urn. Gray, smooth, forgettable. Trisha suggested keeping the urn in their living room for now. Jason agreed. Ava didn't say much. She was almost 10 by then. The funeral home gave them a sealed envelope marked to be opened with attorney present. Jason rolled his eyes and muttered, "Of course she made it a process." They scheduled the appointment at Joanne's office for the following week. It was a Wednesday. Cloudy. Slight drizzle. Jason arrived in business casual. He'd gotten a new job in tech consulting 6 months ago. Trisha wore sunglasses indoors. Ava sat quietly in the hallway, swinging her feet and humming. Joanne greeted them with her usual calm. She didn't smile. Didn't offer coffee. Just motioned toward the seats and placed a thick folder on the desk between them. As executor of Margaret Holloway's estate, I'm here to honor her final wishes. What we're about to discuss is binding, legal, and irreversible. Jason leaned forward, fingers steepled like he was at a board meeting. Right. So let's talk about the house, the account, and that retirement fund. Joanne opened the folder. The rustle of paper had never sounded so loud. She took out a single page. Your mother revised her will shortly after our last contact. She left behind a statement to be read aloud. It supersedes any prior document. Trisha sighed dramatically. She really was extra. But Joanne wasn't rattled. She unfolded the page, glanced once at Jason, then read, slow and clear. I leave behind all my love, but not a single dollar to those who treated me like a transaction. Silence. Like air had been sucked from the room. Jason blinked. Trisha sat up. Ava stopped swinging her legs. Joan let the silence stretch, long enough to sting, then added, all assets were legally transferred to a trust 2 years ago. Ava Holloway is the sole beneficiary, accessible only upon reaching adulthood, managed independently by my office. Jason's voice broke first. Wait, what? What do you mean there's nothing left for us? Joan didn't flinch. There was a home, a savings portfolio, retirement investments, all of which were transferred before death. Per the trust agreement, neither of you are entitled to any portion. She left us nothing? Joanne raised an eyebrow. She left a message. Trisha scoffed. This is insane. We're her family. And that's when Joanne said it, calm, final, and cutting in its precision. She knew. That was it. She knew. Jason's voice rose. She can't do that. I'm her son. That house, she promised. Joanne didn't move. She didn't break the law. She just stopped pretending. Trisha stood up, arms crossed, lips curled. This is emotional manipulation. You think Ava even understands any of this? She's just a kid. From the hallway, a small voice spoke. I'm not just a kid. Everyone turned. Ava stepped inside, quiet but unshaken. She clutched a small plastic container in her hands, the same one Margaret had labeled 2 years ago. She left this in the fridge the day she came by. I never ate it. I didn't want to forget how it smelled. Jason opened his mouth, closed it. Trisha looked away. Joanne gestured gently. Ava, do you want to be here? Ava nodded. She used to tell me stories. About wolves pretending to be sheep. About how silence can be louder than shouting. I remember all of it. She looked straight at Jason. And I remember when Mommy laughed and called her just the bank. The room chilled. No one moved. Ava's eyes weren't angry. Just tired. Tired in that way only children get when they've been paying attention to things adults think they miss. Joanne cleared her throat, returning to the legal script. To be clear, the trust is irrevocable. Any attempts to challenge it will be denied under the Uniform Trust Code. This document is sealed. The will is final. Jason's voice cracked. She never even said goodbye. Joanne finally sighed, folded the paper, set it aside. Maybe she did. Just not the way you wanted. There it was. No yelling. No courtroom drama. Just two people sitting in a room, facing the reflection of their own neglect. Trisha grabbed her purse. Well, good luck with your inheritance, kid. I hope it buys you therapy. She walked out. He followed. No hug. No backward glance. No apology. And yet, there was no emptiness. Because for the first time in years, the only one who truly listened had stayed. Joanne looked at Ava. Would you like me to keep managing it until you're older? Ava stared at the sealed file. No. I'd like to learn. She would have wanted that. Joanne smiled. I'll teach you. A pause. Then Ava added, almost to herself. Everyone thinks she left them nothing. But I think she left me everything. And there it was, the twist. Not just in who got what, but in who understood what they were given. Because money runs out. But clarity, that lingers. The will didn't say much. Just one line. But it rewrote everything. A week later, Ava returned to Joanne's office. She didn't bring her parents. She didn't need to. In one hand, she held a folder of drawings. In the other, a notebook Margaret had given her on her 9th birthday. It was green, with faded corners. On the first page, written in soft cursive. For Ava. So you'll always know who you are. Joanne poured 2 cups of tea. No sugar. No milk. Just like Margaret liked it. You ready? She asked. Ava nodded. I want to understand what she left me. Not just the money. Joanne smiled. Small, proud, quiet. Then let's begin. They spent the whole afternoon at that desk. Joanne explained the trust. How it worked. What it covered. What it protected. Ava listened. Took notes. Asked questions most adults wouldn't know to ask. At one point, she paused and whispered. Did she know they wouldn't come back? Joanne set her glasses down. She didn't expect them to. That's why she made sure you'd be okay. There was no bitterness in her voice. Just a quiet acceptance. A woman who had loved her child too much to let her silence become someone else's shame. Ava looked down at her notes. Then at the photo Joanne had placed on the table. It was Margaret. Sitting on her porch, wearing a sweater with a missing button, cradling a cup of tea in both hands. No makeup. No jewelry. Just peace. She looks free, Ava said. Joanne nodded. Because she finally was. They sat in silence. But it wasn't awkward. It was the kind of silence that wraps around your shoulders and says, it's your turn now. That night, Ava went home. But instead of going to her room, she walked out to the backyard and sat under the maple tree Margaret had planted the day Ava was born. The wind was soft. The branches swayed like someone breathing. She opened the green notebook. Turned to the second page. There, in Margaret's handwriting. Some people will never say thank you. Some people will never return what you gave. That doesn't mean you were wrong to give it. But it means you get to stop. Ava traced the words with her finger. They weren't bitter. They weren't angry. They were just true. And suddenly, she understood something her parents never had. That Margaret's greatest gift wasn't the trust fund. It wasn't the house. It wasn't the silence. It was the choice. The choice to walk away without hating. The choice to love without allowing herself to be erased. And now, that choice belonged to her. Ava didn't touch the money. Not at first. She kept living her days the same: school, library, her part-time art class on Saturdays. But everything felt different, not because life had changed, but because she had learned why it had to. One afternoon, while cleaning out the attic, she found an old cookie tin buried beneath winter blankets. Inside were handwritten letters, dozens of them, addressed simply, "To you when you're ready." She opened the one on top. "You will be told to forgive. You will be told that family is forever." But baby, even trees prune their own branches when they grow in the wrong direction. And sometimes loving yourself means letting others call you cold. Ava read that line 3 times. Then she folded the letter, placed it back inside the tin, and smiled. Not a happy smile. Not a sad one. Just the smile of someone who knows they're no longer looking for approval, especially not from those who only remember her when they need something. She kept the tin under her bed. Not for protection, but for grounding. Because when people talk about inheritance, they think of bank accounts, deeds, jewelry. No one talks about the kind of inheritance that builds boundaries out of heartbreak. Weeks passed. Jason didn't call. Trisha posted vague Facebook updates. Some people are so ungrateful, even in death. Ava never responded. She didn't block them. Didn't fight them. She just stopped being available. That, Margaret would have said, is sometimes the most radical act of healing, to not explain yourself. One Saturday, Joanne invited Ava to a small community event, something Margaret used to help run every spring, Mothers Without Apologies. It wasn't fancy. Just a few chairs in a church basement, coffee in paper cups, and women who had stopped pretending that sacrifice without boundaries was a virtue. Ava sat in the back. Listened to their stories. A woman who left a marriage after 30 years of being invisible. Another who gave her whole paycheck to her brother until she realized he only called on Fridays, payday. And then Ava stood up. She didn't cry. She just said, "My grandma taught me that love isn't proven by how much you give. It's proven by how clearly you draw the line when people start taking." The room fell still. And in that stillness, Ava didn't feel small. She felt seen. Afterward, a woman came up and pressed her hand into Ava's. "She sounds like she was one of us." Ava nodded. She was. That night, Ava wrote in the same green notebook. Some people leave behind money. Some leave behind wounds. She left behind a standard. And maybe that was enough. No gold. No big goodbye. Just one line in a will. One sentence that no one expected, but everyone remembered. A sentence that sounded like silence, but was louder than any scream. "I leave behind all my love, but not a single dollar to those who treated me like a transaction."